As the first top tier we've ever seen go all out, Kaido has and shall continue to be the biggest point of comparison for future characters, a benchmark never forgotten or power creeped out of the story. With that being said, I will discuss the people who will power creep him out of the story. Before we get to it though, I already know how some will react to the title. List? As if Kaido can't be beaten, so first I'll cover why that's not true.
Fucking weirdo. Fucking creep job. Fucking freak-tard. Psycho.
The premise of Kaido is unbeatable of course stems from the strongest creature statement, which by the way, many people didn't believe. Even back in 2016 when this was all we knew, there were still those saying Roger or of course, Shanks is stronger because, bruh, it's Shanks, bruh. Fast forward 10 years, those people were actually right. In fact, they were right the entire time because the title was just a rumor, not a verified fact like Whitebeard's or Mihawk's. I don't really need to go in depth here because most fans are starting to understand the rumor aspect, not only due to the Shanks bias slash agenda I mentioned before, but also due to the narrative of One Piece. The series is a shonen, and the main way stakes increase is by introducing greater threats, meaning Luffy's next major opponent should be greater than Kaido, yes, in a transitive way. Luffy's most popular fights are the ones where he wins through being more powerful, not the ones where he figures out tricky abilities or whatever. It's much more satisfying to watch someone climb a mountain rather than find a way around it. So if Kaido was the strongest character in the series, every following Luffy fight will not be as fulfilling. That doesn't mean bad, but not as good as they could be. Combine all said with the fact Oda already wrote an out with Kaido's title being a rumor, and yeah, he was never the strongest of anything. Now some of you may be saying all of this only applies if Luffy is stronger than Kaido, which I don't think has to be true. Even so, we'll get to that later. Keep in mind my list will rank percentages based on the chance an interpretation is true. For example, when I give Whoop Slap a 30% chance of beating Kaido, that doesn't mean he's a fraction of his power or would win 3 out of 10 times. 30% is how likely the interpretation of a victory is, whether it be extreme diff or no diff. I'm doing it this way because all of these characters are ambiguous. You can argue none of them win, you can argue none of them lose. But for now, let's stick to the people who probably can't hang. Number 1, Zoro.
Oh my god!
Number 2, Big Mom. I don't think I need to explain this one. The notion of Big Mom over Kaido has been long forgotten. Regardless, Kaido himself says Big Mom is weaker than Snake Man Luffy, then proceeds to eat that version of Luffy. Number 3, EOS Zoro. 3.5, Green Bull / Fujitora. Aramaki is legitimately scared of the beast. You might just say he was cautious of his crew, but immediately after, Shanks makes him piss his pants off aura alone. Shanks and Kaido are stated to stand shoulder to shoulder, so Kaido would do the exact same thing. Fujitora has no feats besides being an admiral. At most, you can say he's equal to Green Bull. There are no valid interpretations of any of these 4 winning, so they all get 0%. Number 5, Luffy. Here we fucking go. Okay, so the real Luffy versus Kaido fight starts here. Their hockey is on the same level at this point, after which Kaido stops suppressing himself. The problem is what happened before. The beast already fought 15 people, you can argue 12 of which weren't doing actual damage, but the last 3 are inexcusable, shown in the fact Onigashima is losing balance due to him being weakened. Regardless, all of these people beforehand were damaging Kaido somewhat. He still needed to exert stamina / endurance to tank these hits. It is a luxury you cannot give to Luffy. Beforehand, the agenda was kept alive by saying he was getting hit by Kaido the entire time, which is true. However, now we know eating food is a full restore to his stamina / heals him, so the damage before splitting the skies is rendered null. Kaido is the one who's nerfed when their final 1v1 starts. That doesn't really matter though, because the main talking point is obviously Luffy died! And like many other Morge fans, I used to be on this wave, until I realized Straw Hat is an awakened Zoan, which are known for their recovery speed. The characters we learn this from are the Minotaur guards from Impel Down. Those same guards who only scaled to PTS gear to Luffy, yet recovered off a named attack from Jinbei, who is leagues beyond such. We also see it with Lucci almost going unconscious, then minutes later he had nothing but a bruised cheek. It doesn't mean Luffy can't die, because his fruit did unexplainably revive him, yet the zone recovery should be added on top. So he flat out had multiple revives, whereas Kaido was only getting weaker ever since the scabbards. And you can see it during the midpoint of G5, where Onigashima starts teetering at a 30-degree angle because Kaido is too weak. Many fans then pivot to the performance itself, claiming Luffy embarrassed Kaido, though that's only partially true, as once the beast went hybrid, he had the clear edge. In addition, we are ignoring the fact the Yonko allowed Luffy to regenerate and specifically specifically clashed with Badragon when he could have dodged it. Now you could say that's Kaido's character, so he would do it in a normal scenario. However, in a normal scenario, he wouldn't be weakened before the fight starts, nor would Luffy have time to recover. Then people jump to the narrative of the battle, the notion Joy Boy is the only one who could defeat Kaido. However, that's so overblown. Joy Boy beating the Yonko is an inference Kaido made from Oden's journal, not some legitimate prophecy. Said inference doesn't even entail Joy Boy winning a fair one-on-one. It's just an assumption because the only way to open Wano's borders is to defeat Kaido. On top of this, I'ma use a counter hoe because Oda making Kaido war with 15 people beforehand is not something you see for any other Luffy antagonist. Usually his battles are dead equal, so by the end, the reader can assume he's greater. The easiest way for the Beast to live up to his title is to subvert that, having us guessing whether Luffy ever surpassed him. The chance I give for Straw Hat being greater is 20%. You can make a solid argument, but the evidence for Kaido is just too stacked. 6. Kizaru. Ever since Egghead ended, everyone has been asking this question. Not only is it a battle between Luffy's newest opponents, embodying the idea of speed versus strength, but of course harkens back to the Admiral versus Yonko debate. The matchup can be divided into 3 different stats. In terms of attack potency, both Kaido and Kizaru were clashing with Gear 5 Luffy. Many try to condemn Kizaru by starting the Haki argument, however, said stance ignores the idea someone could just have a really strong armament Haki. We also know the weaker half of a Haki clash takes extra damage, yet this never happens to Kizaru. On top of Newton's third law, the Admiral should have just as much AP as Kaido. At least his physical punches and kicks, which have advanced armament Haki. I repeat, Kizaru has durability negation. I need to repeat for the idiots in the back because half the comments on my Big Mom video were literally just, how is he going to hurt her? Even when I fully explain it. Then for those who claim advanced armament won't be enough, refer back to this timestamp. Moving on to speed, Hybrid Kaido blitzed Gear 5 at least 3 times. You can't say the same for Kizaru in terms of combat speed, but there is the fact he was mentally nerfed. With this nerf, he was still able to keep pace with G5, only being knocked down because he didn't understand Luffy's powers. You can't quantify the nerf beyond saying it's there, so I'll equalize the stat because both fighters would have the edge on Luffy in speed. Real quick though, there's this dumbass argument referencing the fact Kizaru blocked all of Snake Man's hits, whereas Kaido didn't, ignoring how Kaido never used Future Sight until then, as well as wasn't at his physical peak, because he goes on to clap G5 Luffy, which shown by Kizaru is exponentially faster than Snake Man. Needed to cover that one. So we've established the Yonko and Kizaru are on par in terms of attack power / speed. However, different fighters have different stats. As far as we know, the Admiral's endurance is ass. He was KO'd by Luffy in 1 hit. Mental nerf or not, that's nothing on Kaido. You can make the argument Kizaru was faking because of an implication in Saint Saturn's dialogue. Said implication has decent backing, but that's just it, an implication. If we go off of what we've seen, I can't be lenient on the Admiral. Yet again, Vision doesn't tell the whole truth. So I say 37%. Maybe Oda truly intended for the Marine to be the next level up from Kaido. However, he didn't have Kizaru show any great feats, plus this is not being portrayed as a main Luffy fight. It's more of a short scuffle, giving us a sneak peek of what the final war will be like. That's most of Egghead's fights. Yet this is not me boosting the agenda of, oh, Luffy was just trying to escape, because that makes no sense. Then for those who are going to say, mental nerf is bullshit, Luffy wasn't using ACOG, Admirals can't, I have a whole Luffy versus Kizaru vid, so yeah. 7. Shanks. This is actually the closest debate in One Piece, because unlike Zoro versus Sanji or Mihawk versus the Rat, the matchup is legitimately even and we might never get a solid answer. As said earlier though, Shanks, Kaido, and Whitebeard are stated to stand shoulder to shoulder. This probably refers to strength. If it were a status thing, Big Mom would be included, yet it also doesn't mean they're dead equals. Spoiler alert, Whitebeard is stated to be the greatest of the 3, so who is the latter? Your first instinct will be to mention Marineford, but this will work against you. The only thing we know about Shanks beating Kaido is that they clashed. Nowhere is it stated he fought or especially beat Kaido. Not only did Shanks show up to the war, no battle damage, yet it's also boosted by his opponent. I wonder how long it's been since I fought someone who can truly go toe-to-toe with me. This statement makes no sense if he had an equal duel with Red Hair 2 years ago. We can't glean anything from this interaction, but Kaido did, because even after sensing Shanks' power with observation Haki, he's able able to assess he's one of the greats, yet still believes there's no one in the world who can defeat him. Yes, it's anecdotal, though from a person who would never lie about something like this. Kaido is not so arrogant, he just blindly believes he is the greatest. Also real quick, Shanks one-shotting Kid and Kaido not one-shotting Law means nothing because this Kaido is like 4 levels removed from his peak. Speaking of, how would the fight itself actually go? Well, both opponents are pretty much equal in base stats. Kaido has more hacks, but fire breath and being able to fly won't really help in this situation. Red Hair has observation killing, however we don't understand the ability. If Shanks can turn off future sight whenever he wants without any drawback whatsoever, unlikely, then he probably wins. Disregarding that, he might get some free licks in anyway since Kaido may be suppressed. Or maybe the beast would immediately jump to his strongest form, who knows? Practically, there's no real answer here. The only thing we can base it off of is an informal guess from Kaido himself. So what about narratively? A lot of people are going to jump on the idea Oda saves the strongest characters for later, or that Shanks will be Luffy's final opponent. Though, one, he saved Kizaru for later, plus had Luffy fight him after Kaido, yet I just did a whole section on why Kizaru probably doesn't beat Kaido. 2, the idea of Shanks being Luffy's final challenge is extremely antiquated. In fact, fighting at all makes little sense. Because as I explained in this vid, Red Hair is helping Luffy reach the One Piece. That's his entire goal, there's no reason to antagonize him. So then people jump to the idea he's gonna test Luffy or something. Even if we do go with it, said test won't mean anything, it'll just prove Shanks is relative, which we already knew. Unless we get a direct statement. Compare it to Kaido, who is one of the few characters in the story who has been called the strongest. I find it funny how Shanks has ties to all these figures, yet never had that reputation for himself. Oda stated he wanted the Beast to be the ultimate adversary and was unsure how Luffy could beat him. Considering what I said earlier about leaving his loss ambiguous, it's easy to say he truly wanted Kaido to be the strongest of the relevant characters at the time. The last thing I can see for Red Hair is that he's basically Oda's self-insert, so he's going to get some insane feats by the end of the story, even if they don't directly compare to Kaido. This already happened with the Joy Boy level Haki, which of course doesn't mean anything. If Shanks is equal to Joy Boy, then who's to say Kaido or anyone else isn't on that level? All in all, I give it 50%. Currently, Kaido has the overwhelming edge in feats, though if you truly go off of Shanks being the ultimate endgame character, then yeah, he could be greater. Number 8, the Hawk's Eye. Now, if Shanks and Kaido stand shoulder to shoulder, then Mihawk is better, right? No, because said statement also includes Whitebeard. Hawkeye's is over Red Hair, but it's also a fact Newgate is even better. These two are also stated to be rivals, meaning he could just be in the gap of Shanks to Kaido. Some may try to downplay Mihawk specifically by bringing up Kaido's top 5. In retrospect, it's hilarious how we used to treat this as the holy grail when it never meant anything. Because here's Garp doing this, Roger saying that, and look, the Marine isn't there either. So yeah, Mihawk is pretty much the same thing. There is an idea Zoro knows how strong Hawk is, yet still called Kaido the toughest. It's iffy though, because Zoro specifically states so-called and they say, referring to the rumor. In opposition, Mihawk has a very blatant statement about being the strongest man after Whitebeard's death. However, it's hard not to take it as an outlier as he had others while Whitebeard was alive. The only thing left is the prospect of Oda not having Zoro's final opponent being weaker than Luffy's from 3 to 4 arcs ago. Based on such, I give Mihawk a 65% chance. Like Shanks, he's an endgame character, however, Hawk has more legitimate reasoning for being better than Kaido in a strength sense, rather than just saying he could be. Number 9, Akainu or Aokiji. Now in terms of feats, both Sakazuki and Kuzan should upscale from old Garp. The former Admiral was able to match Garp evenly while being mentally nerfed. Even if you say Garp was nerfed as well because he had to fight an entire island, it's still very clear they are highly relative. This is supported by the fact Akainu is implied to be the current best of the Navy from the data books. Though in relation to Kaido, we have nothing to go off of. The most we know about old Garp is that he's relative to old Whitebeard, yet Kaido is as well. In a practical aspect, this battle has no answer either. Maybe you could say Akainu's magma has no effect on Kaido because his skin can withstand it. At that point, the match comes down to pure hockey. Same thing with Aokiji. Aokiji, the Yonko can break out of his ice with Haki, making the battle a slugfest. Their AP is on Kaido's level, as both of them are better than Kizaru, plus they have advanced arms. Of course, the bad showings from Marineford don't count, as Akainu and Aokiji were far weaker, being relative to a sick Whitebeard who couldn't even use ACOG, nowhere near Kaido's level. However, after the time skip, again, they are greater than Kizaru, who is on par with Gear 5. This level of power was most likely achieved through their 10-day duel. We know characters get stronger through combat. Said battle supports the idea they have much more endurance than Kizaru, since Kuzan and Sakazuki were tanking each other's attacks that got more powerful as the days went on. These two are undoubtedly on Kaido's level, just like the previous fighters. However, what gives them more of an edge is the power creep I mentioned earlier. Sakazuki could very well be Luffy's next major opponent. Then unlike Kizaru, it will be transitive, because if the battle does go down, it will be a main multi-chapter endeavor where Luffy surpasses him in pure strength. This is supported by all the Akainu statements. I think Oda knew he wasn't going to have him do anything until the very end, so he just gave him the most insane hype. Beats One Piece in a year, highest offensive power, 5 billion berry bounty, Jesus. At the same time though, it's all kinda just speculation. I've seen people say Sabo will beat Akainu. Doesn't seem possible now, but with how much Oda has been emphasizing him training, I can see a plot power up happening. With all this, I say Kuzan/Sakazuki deserve a 75%. Highly likely Akainu is Luffy's next extreme diff fight, with them already possessing insane feats/statements. 10. Blackbeard. Let's get the dumbass anti-feats out of the way. Post-time skip teach is far greater than pre, meaning none of these statements apply. He was scared of Rayleigh, however it's clearly explained it was only due to reputation. He was scared of Aokiji, but that was because half of his crew were about to be killed. Struggling with law means nothing, as he was only hit once, which was due to him being off guard. And even so, tanking said attack is already a Big Mom level feat. I have a whole video on Blackbeard, which only ages better by the day. Now he is a post-Kaido villain, so he should be greater, right? Well, even if you don't take it in a transitive way, he still has to scale to Luffy, or else he won't be able to react or hit him. So teach should be physically relative already, especially if you upscale him from Aokiji. However, if you don't do that and run with the theory of Blackbeard isn't at his peak, things get complicated. Blackbeard getting a new fruit shouldn't amplify his overall stats, unless it's a Zoan. Of course, Zoans are the most plausible theory for his third fruit. A large part of the matchup is based on whether or not you believe this Zoan theory, because at the end of the day, that's all it is, a really solid theory. The actual battle would probably just come down to the same stats as the others. Maybe Teach could turn off Kaido's hybrid form with the Yami fruit. However, if he can't do this at range, it's unlikely to ever happen. Based on all evidence, I grant an 87% chance he could beat Kaido. We know Blackbeard will be a greater challenge for Luffy, yet it depends on how you think that will happen. Number 11. Oden. This is why I based everything on interpretation, because some think Oden is Roger level, strongest character in the verse, or he's just on par with the Yonko. Let's go through the feats so you can see what I'm talking about. Oden was already low end relative to legends like Roger or Whitebeard being able to tank Divine Departure, but you can spin it in all sorts of different ways. Maybe Oden is low end relative, maybe the attack wasn't that serious. Maybe the old gen is on par with the new gen, so Green Bull could probably take the same thing. Now, learning Advanced Conqueror's Haki, an insane buff, should have closed the gap significantly. On top of this is the self-proclaimed strongest swordsmanship, even though he saw Roger fight. However, the Weaver card puts strongest in quotations as well, furthering the idea Oden is wrong. Now, if you think I'm playing coy about all this, hear me out. The reason I'm so hesitant to say Oden is a top all-time character is because when he returns to Wano, he clashes evenly with base Kaido from 20 years ago. Many skip over this to the part where he almost killed Kaido, but that probably makes no sense considering what happened. There's no indication Kaido was knocked out besides white eyes, which, okay, sure buddy. So if we go with the logic of Oden only being relative to the Yonko 20 years ago, what does that say about today? We know Kaido is greater, as not only did he continue fighting, but also grew larger. The difference is unquantifiable though. You can easily say this version is near his prime due to his age in comparison to other top tiers. The beast already had his reputation of being the strongest creature, plus he implies Oden would be capable of the same feats in the present. Replicating a scar doesn't mean he would win, Yet considering the fact there are metas for Oden being Roger level, with lower interpretations still putting him in Kaido's tier, I give it a 90% chance. Especially if you downplay Kaido and really say he was about to get 2-shot. So if Oden has this high a chance of winning, I'm sure you can imagine what I think of the next figures. 12. Whitebeard. Unlike Kaido, Whitebeard was actually the strongest. He was directly stated by the omniscient narrator to be the most powerful man while Kaido was alive. I have a whole video on how One Piece titles work, it's pretty simple. Now, do I think this Whitebeard could beat this Kaido? No. As shown by the war, Newgate would deteriorate exponentially due to his sickness. However, it is still a fact while on his medication, in this state, he was the most powerful. So obviously, Prime Whitebeard wouldn't have such a problem at all. He is 100% beating Kaido. Though, by how much? Because depending on the gap between the old gen and new, the Beast could have a shot at some of these next guys. If you think the old generation is an entire league beyond the current Yonko, then every person following beats Kaido. However, if you believe old characters don't lose their power, Kaido being near equal to old Whitebeard would also include Prime, which puts these next placements up for debate. Roger / Garp are on par with Whitebeard. In fact, Roger is stated to be the strongest person Newgate ever clashed with. This at least puts Roger over Shanks, in which case we have another Mihawk situation. Besides that, there's not much else known, so these two get 65 to 100%. Rox is a more definitive case. He scales to the younger versions of the old gen, though not in their prime. What I'm more interested in is him scaling to Herald. The years after Rox's death saw Whitebeard rise to become the most powerful pirate, as stated by his Viver card. However, he was only rumored to be the strongest man. If said title includes giants, then Herald could have reigned as the greatest, which Rox would upscale from. Then finally, Rox is verbatim stated to be Roger's greatest foe. Kaido still revered him as a great pirate, even though he hated his time on the Rock's crew. So I give Davy D. Zebek a 100% chance of beating him. Lastly, Joy Boy / Emu. If Luffy is at least close to surpassing Kaido, then a full potential version of him definitely did. Emu is a threat comparable to that same potential. Shanks possibly having equal hockey to Joy Boy is also more evidence to suggest the new gen being on par with these legends, though again, that is conjecture. If we apply the concept of power creep to One Piece, then there is no way these two aren't stronger than Kaido. However, if you really have some kind of hard-on, believing Oda doesn't care about setting the highest stakes possible, using Shanks as a way to scale to Joy Boy, as well as his best interpretation, maybe, just maybe, Kaido is top 1.